Good afternoon, good morning, everybody on the event today. We'll be talking about how to make the right cloud strategy decisions. And I will first give you a quick intro into Software AG. We are one of the first software companies ever to come into existence. 50 years of innovation. We have presence in more than 70 countries around the globe, so much likely we will be anywhere close to you. If you would have a need to talk to us directly, we are ranked as a leader in many Gartner quadrants and Forrester waves over the course of the last decade or so. We have the fortune of working with many customers. Most of them are large, complex organizations. 80% of Fortune 500 customers are customers of Software AG. We are organized in 4 business lines. I'm part of the business transformation business line. Aside of this, we also have integration API, IoT analytics, and Adabas Natural as our mainframe solution business line. As Simon said, I'm a SVP for product marketing management and R&D of the Alphabet product line. All right, so getting into the subject, we will be talking about how to make the transition to the cloud a successful journey. I will start with setting the premise on what does it mean getting to the cloud. Why are we doing this? Obviously, cloud and digital business transformation are major disruptors for the business world as we come to know it. We see a lot of potential and opportunity springing off the combination of cloud and digital business. Of course, there are technical opportunities in the sense of efficiency and cost savings, but there are also business opportunities in identifying new revenue streams, getting closer to customers, giving new ways of customer input and interaction, and accelerating your digital business journeys. When you come to thinking about how do you get to the cloud, then what may have seemed very simple at the outset is actually getting much more complex. You come to understand quite quickly this is an overwhelming challenge for most of established organizations because of the size, because of the many different parties involved. Because of having a good understanding of what dependencies and impacts you have, deciding where to focus, and understanding what's the lay of the land to begin with. So what you need is a way of identifying the right cloud migration candidates. We will discuss how portfolio analysis and portfolio management in general can be a very successful foundation for such decision to be taken. You want to understand how this helps you to also control your technical obsolescence and your technical debt. And you want at the end to have a cloud strategy and roadmap that you can easily communicate and share with the bigger part of your organization. You do all this to raise the bars on success rates for your investments and to accelerate the transition to the cloud. But you also do this so as to providing the right mix of deployment options between incumbent on-premise business and cloud flavors. Talking about the cloud flavors, and I'm certainly not going to go deep into this. Everybody knows this. We have various types of cloud deployment: infrastructure as a service, containers, platform as a service, software as a service. Every single one of those four types of cloud deployment has its own pros and cons, has its own areas of applicability, and as and when you come up with your cloud migration strategies, you will obviously have to factor this in, and you have to decide, okay, which part of my portfolio is going to adopt which of cloud deployment types. There's a second way of looking at this, and that is coming from the implementation angle. There's, generally speaking, two different types of implementation or adoption. For the bulk of your existing IT portfolio, you would hope for a migration approach where you can pretty much take more or less as is and move it into a cloud arena. That may or may not be successful, and we will have to discuss what indicators of success or inappropriateness are in your incumbent portfolio. You will also have to embrace the complexities of your own organization because there are many parties that have to come together, and not even necessarily limited to your own organization. You may actually also have to involve partners, business partners that you are using in terms of running your IT function or parts of the infrastructure, etc. And then there's this second implementation approach, and that is more of a transformation approach. You would not adopt this for a broad spectrum or subset of your portfolio. You would be doing this more in a selected approach. This is the approach you want to favor for areas that are dynamic, that need innovation, where you are trying to reach new frontiers, and in using the transformation approach, you can obviously take advantage of many of the new capabilities that are closely associated with cloud services, such as machine learning, artificial intelligence, big data, streaming analytics, or the like. You will then have to think about how do you go about clustering your application portfolios. Many of you will own application portfolios that go into the hundreds, if not thousands. It is not a trivial undertaking to come up with a clustering in such a complex portfolio. Simplification strategies have led to identifying this 6R set of archetypes, where we actually have collapsed two of them into one, retain and retire. We are looking at as being one bucket. You have the second one, which is rehosting. You have a third one, which is refactoring. Then you have re-architect, and you have rebuild. So this is the spectrum of options that you have available, where the retain retire is basically do nothing. Rehost is do a little. Refactor is do a little more. Re-architect is do yet a little more. And rebuild is really do the whole thing all over. Now, obviously, that's a bit sloppily speaking on my part, so let's give it a little more just. If you think about rehosting, you by and large have an estate that is capable to go to the cloud, even though it may have certain challenges often in the terms of the technology that you're using, which may not readily be cloud capable, or in the dependencies that you are wrestling with. Then when you look at the refactoring, you will typically have to do some changes on the code level, but not necessarily very dramatic changes. and you often would use this for either applications that are modular or self-contained. Then you have the topic of re-architecting, where the changes are more significant that you have to do, and you would typically look into perhaps changing substantial pieces of your underpinning technologies. You would definitely look into aspects like health security, single sign-on, disaster recovery, communication and identity management, etc. And rebuilding you use for these pockets where you are hoping to disrupt your competitive landscape or the market that you're operating in, where you would want to embrace the capabilities of cloud to the maximum extent possible. We are singling out here the aspect of CI/CD, which is key for these type of rebuild segments of your portfolio, because you want to enable yourself to bring change into the user community, be these external or internal user communities, bring change to these user communities very swiftly in a very continuous fashion to raise the user satisfaction and user retention to the maximum possible. So when we then look at the cloud migration strategies that we have at hand, we can find those 4 R's back that I had talked about on the previous slide. We would have, again, this do very little, do a little more, do yet something more, to all the way do it all over. We have the cloud types that best complement these 4 approaches, starting from infrastructure as a service on the left-hand side, all the way to serverless microservices on the far right of our slide. And the drivers for these different strategies are mostly cost drivers and a desire to move to a data center-less operating model in your IT on the rehosting end, and to an accelerated innovation on the right-hand end. In the middle, you would look for the refactoring to shorten your update cycles, to simplifying update. You would also look into gaining elasticity on the refactoring end, and on the re-architecting side, you would look for improvements in scale and agility, as well as a route to adopting innovative cloud capabilities. So when you come to thinking about what should be our journey to the cloud roadmap, then we would suggest you take this 6-hop approach here. Where first you need to get an insight into the IT portfolio that you have. You need to evaluate that portfolio as to how suitable it is for cloud migration. You come to identifying cloud focus areas to come up with a cloud migration strategy, to be able to communicate a cloud migration strategy, which you will have to vet and validate with regard to the impacts it has to overall business as well as IT in particular. And then you have to start managing your IT cloud portfolio as an active sub-portfolio itself. If we zoom into the next level, then the questions that you might ask in getting an insight into your IT portfolio is, firstly, what's the application portfolio? Many of organizations will already struggle at this point. You want to know who are the beneficiaries of those applications, which means who do I need to talk to, who do I need to engage with when it comes to the cloud migration conversation. This will typically lead to you starting to build a catalog of applications and technologies. You will be looking at representing your business through some business capability model, for instance. You would associate this with a maturity assessment or with a assessment of differentiation that you are able to attain with these capabilities in the market. You would also factor in aspects like where are our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in that IT landscape? Who are the vendors that we are dealing with? What is the regulatory framework that we are exposed to with those applications? So you would, generally speaking, go through a evaluation process for these applications to result in a good and solid understanding of key performance indicators, of costs of the life cycle. You would also cover aspects like the data sensitivity, because many of jurisdictions will have tight controls as to what can or cannot be done with regard to data and cloud. When you define the cloud focus areas, you want to know where the cost drivers are, because many will look at the cloud as an opportunity to either radically reduce cost or at least shift cost from for instance, investment into operational expense. You want to know where your SLA shortfalls are, because you would hope that moving to the cloud can give you a helping hand in improving along those SLA shortfalls. So you would conduct a portfolio analysis to determine where you land with regard to the 6R strategy that I had outlined earlier, and which parts of your portfolio gravitate to which of the 6Rs. And you would use the business capability to understand where do you have a need for cloud adoption most significantly, and where would you see benefits resulting from cloud adoption with least effect in your business capability arena. So you then are able to actually formulate your cloud migration strategy. So you want to know what are the candidates for investment and retirement. You want to know where are the transformation needs. And again, the transformation needs you would probably express along the business capability dimension, while investment and retirement candidates you would most definitely align with the application portfolio itself. So you need to have a clear way of communicating that application investment strategy. You need to make sure it is being acted upon. And you may come up with something that I would call cloud native architecture blueprints. So what are those solutions that we should be gravitating towards for the transformational aspects and elements of our portfolio? So what's the impact of such a cloud strategy? Is it implementable? Can it help us lower our technical debt? Is it resulting in an accelerated improvement along customer experience? So you would want to measure, for instance, technical obsolescence, and you would want to track how well are you adopting and how well are you retaining cloud footprint across the possibly very complex application portfolio. And then lastly, you want to see how the impacts of your cloud portfolio. Are you really reducing costs? Are you really improving on your SLAs? Are you able to elastically scale the way you had hoped for? Are you raising user satisfactions? And are you able to accelerate your digital business adoption through the transformational aspects of your cloud roadmap? That will allow you to recalibrate your cloud focus areas. It will allow you to take decision as to whether or not you want to continue on migrating certain pieces of your application portfolio, or you want to shift the focus, and overall you would be adjusting and expanding the cloud migration strategy. So let's look at how you lay the foundation for this cloud migration. This is a fairly simple starting view or starting perspective on what it takes to wrap your head around the application and technology catalog. Remember, that was one of the steps that we had looked at in our cloud journey identification. Here are the different elements and aspects that you need to think about and incorporate. So you want to know, okay, what are the technologies that we are using? Who are the vendors of those technologies? How suitable are these technologies for cloud usage and deployment? What are the IT capabilities that are associated with those? And how easily can we bring those IT capabilities into a cloud setup? You obviously need to understand the infrastructure that you're using, both the physical as well as the virtual infrastructure. And you need to gauge how qualified those infrastructure elements are for a use in the cloud, in particular in the context of a rehosting conversation or a refactoring conversation. Thirdly, you need to understand your business capabilities and any dependencies that you may have between those business capabilities, so as to understanding which portions of these business capabilities may I look into enabling through cloud deployed solutions, which capabilities is a cloud deployed enablement not suitable for. You then put your attention on the application portfolio itself. So you get a understanding of what are the relevant applications, how are they interrelated with the technologies, with the virtual servers or the physical servers, and with the business capabilities, which will allow you to take a segmentation of that business, that application portfolio, and then in understanding the information flow dependencies between the applications, you will have an understanding how well the clusters are that you have identified, delineated, and whether or not you need to make adjustments to this clustering in order to avoid any dependency breaking in the landscape. So that means before you can decide about a cloud strategy, it is important that you carry out the necessary analysis on the different portfolios that you have. And this would call for you using a portfolio management system that is capable of not just listing, but also assessing, evaluating, and juxtaposing the portfolios that you own. Here's an example, fairly straightforward, of how that application portfolio may look like. So you have your applications, and you look at those as a single source of truth of applications. So you need this to be a living body, because chances are during the course of, say, a 12-month period, you will be introducing 20, 30, 40 new applications, and hopefully you will also be phasing out a like number, if not even larger number of applications. Which leads me to the second aspect that is very important. You need to get full visibility into the life cycle. Where are we with those applications? How much remaining life cycle do we have with those applications? Where are we planning to make innovative iterations on these applications? Like you see here for AF Goodbye, you have 2 versions that are in your portfolio, obviously one being already retired or on the way to retirement. Then you want to keep track of what the cloud footprint is that you have. So you would, for instance, track this through an architecture type, which can have different flavors of cloud or different flavors of on-premise deployment. And this is something that you then complement with a more business lens through the business capabilities, where you now say, okay, what is the relevance of the business capabilities, as we show here by the use of color, but we also highlight what is the roadmap that we have for those business capabilities in regard to the supporting or enabling application portfolio, and we can automatically highlight conflicts in that strategy. Like, for instance, here for contact management, we have a business enabling capability, but we are planning to inflate the complexity of the application portfolio, which would typically not be the right strategy for a business enabling capability. So what you do is you trace the capabilities and their application support. You get an understanding of what the impacts of moving to the cloud are for those different business capabilities. You have the ability to get an understanding of the health of these applications and how suitable they are to be considered moving to the cloud, or whether they should outright be replaced, perhaps with a SaaS solution to begin with. And of course, the business relevance is an important element in that conversation. So if you have mission critical business capabilities, then you want to use a different approach and measure than if you have a business operating capability. So when you look into coming up with your cloud focus and strategies, there are 2 approaches that we propose here. One is a top-down portfolio analysis. So you really look through the lens of your strategies and plans, and you determine where your modernization needs are. You do this through a scoring approach, where you first take a look at how easy or difficult is it for me to move an application to the cloud. So that would be here along the horizontal. And then you look at what benefit would I be getting from bringing that application to the cloud. And you do this, of course, in context. So you do this in context of what is the workload that I have. So how much infrastructure do I need? What type of infrastructure do I need? How suitable is that infrastructure for cloud? What's the architecture that I have? How scalable is this architecture? How decomposable is this architecture, or how monolithic is this architecture? What are the financial parameters of this application? And when we say financial, that is not limited to just the infrastructure or the license. It's equally looking at the operations and maintenance and development cost, at the cost of servicing this, the cost associated with enabling the user community, et cetera, et cetera. Looking at the risk and understanding how the risk profile is going to be different if this application was to be moved to the cloud versus its current on-premise deployment. Understanding the operational footprint, understanding the security exposure. All these are elements in this assessment. And what you will result in is kind of represented here in this portfolio, and is now further discussed in looking at how this portfolio is shaped. We have the two dimensions, the suitability to migrate and the value that we are able to attain from such a migration. There's two extreme ends here. On the one hand, we talk about the ones that are harder to migrate and the ones that are better suited to migrate, and we have low potential value to be gained and high potential value to be gained. Now, each of those dimensions of assessment will be built as an aggregate that builds up on a number of more atomic figures. So we would look in the dimension of the value. We would look into business relevance. We would look into something like the end of life for the application, the compliance and regulatory context. License portability is an important topic for most of organizations. Understanding elasticity requirements on the workload and understanding the business impact that the application has for the business at large, meaning, okay, how much of disruption are serviceability problems resulting in. This will then result in a cloud relevance score, as we call it. And on the horizontal axis, we would also look into the end-of-life topic. We would look into what type of infrastructure are we using, what's the architecture type, how are we authenticating users, what's the number of interfaces, and that would then flow into a cloud readiness score. So if we take those then into account, we can easily construct a quadrant portfolio here, where each of those quadrants has a clear guidance as to what the strategy and focus should be. So upper right-hand corner, we would call this the focus area. This is where you get the biggest bang for the buck, while on the quick wins, you may actually be able to convince your organization much quicker in cloud migration being the right strategy to begin with. The long-term bets will require more consideration, more analysis, more thinking, more preparation, and retain and retire is probably something you want to put on the back burner and either not pursue at all or pursue at a later point in time. That translates directly into the portfolio that we are showing here. So you see the same type of quadrants that I had just shown on the previous chart. You have the cloud relevance dimension, the cloud readiness dimension here. If we now look into, okay, the focus area are applications that we believe are best suited for migration, that show a higher potential of generating benefits when being migrated into a cloud deployment. Just migrating those applications may not be as simple as a lift and shift. We would typically look into embracing a platform as a service type of deployment. And that means we would have to think about, okay, what are the services from the cloud service provider that we should be looking into assembling to building the right foundation for these type of applications. Secondly, we have the quick wins, and here we would by and large look at applications that are fairly suited to go into the cloud as is, though bringing them to the cloud isn't necessarily giving you a great deal of value. Great deal of value means you may not actually make a lot of cost reduction. What you would be gaining, though, is elasticity. What you would be gaining, though, is a reduction in dependency on qualified resources that you have to have in-house. You would be assured by the cloud platform provider that they will take care of all the lower level operational activities that you are not necessarily expert in. And a special flavor for this would be scouting out for SaaS solutions that you can use to replacing existing solutions that you currently run, and hoping for the SaaS solution provider to allow you to easily migrate the data and the processes from your current on-premises based solution into this SaaS application. Looking at the long-term bets, we see that there is a significant value potential, and that makes them interesting for us. We would still see that there is significant effort in making those applications migrate to the cloud, and it would also typically be complex in your organizational setup because multiple of your organizations, departments, whatever, business units would be involved in making this migration successful and happen. And then we have lastly the retain and retire constituents, and it is harder to migrate them, and it's less beneficial to migrate them, and you would first want to take a very close look as to which of those applications really have a long-term perspective for us, which of those applications are strategic to us, and if they are, then you would look into perhaps taking an infrastructure as a service-based rehosting approach, lift and shift approach. Just as additional pieces of information here, the bubble size in this portfolio would be a representative of the operational expense that you have on an annualized basis, which shows you that the bigger bubbles are more valuable to start with. And the color coding indicates what have your internal experts determined as the cloud migration approach. It follows the 6R approach, and it complements the score-based assessment that we have conducted here, which is, as I said, based on cloud relevance and cloud readiness, much the way we have looked at this on the earlier slide. Now you can bring these perspectives together, and you can take the application portfolio, juxtapose it with the cloud relevance and cloud readiness scores, combine it with the cloud strategy as determined by your internal experts or perhaps consultants that you have hired doing these things for you, and then complementing this with the system recommended focus areas so that you can balance the views and you are not kind of left at mercy of the expert opinion, but you're equally not left at mercy with the rules that are behind those scoring mechanisms. Ultimately, the decision is yours. You will have to decide what the cloud migration strategy is for the individual elements of the different clusters in your portfolio. We are showing here a cloud migration strategy board that is used to actually taking these decisions. So you have the 5 key migration strategies that we had discussed showing here. And you can move the applications into the right cluster from the perspective of what is the best approach for each of those specific applications. And it also allows you to communicate this into the organization, so everyone, be it a user of the application or be it the business analyst for a business capability that is beneficiary of such application, or the manager of a business unit that is using an application for certain business critical activity. Everybody will be able to understand what the strategy is, and you have the ability to communicate any changes to that strategy the same easy way. And of course, you also know which portions of your portfolio you still have to decide about. And then you can simply take those applications and move them along the board into the right cluster of your 5 Rs. So now you want to understand, okay, what is the cloud impact? What is the impact of the cloud strategy that you have decided? And this is complementing the top-down approach that I had introduced earlier a couple slides ago with a bottom-up portfolio analysis approach. So here you really want to focus on what workload can go to the cloud, while in the top-down analysis you have focused on what should go to the cloud. And you are more looking into the requirements and the technical aspects of the applications, and less so into the business view. So you want to use this as a way of prioritizing your cloud migration goals, choosing the right options, and evaluating the impact. One important element and aspect in that context is understanding the technical obsolescence and how it plays into your cloud migration strategy. This view demonstrates this with a portfolio of Microsoft-based technologies. Many of you will be having significant dependency on Microsoft-based technologies. There is a very steady flow of new versions of technologies, and old versions are being phased out. And you can see some of these technologies are already phased out. You want to see how is this all interrelated. So how is the technology lifecycle and the application lifecycle interlinked? and you want to understand how you can use this to reducing your technical debt and minimizing the lifecycle conflicts along your portfolio. And if you are able to bring these different perspectives together, you can actually rationalize your portfolio before you even start migrating to the cloud, so you can leave things behind that anyhow are already close to their end of life. You then also want to understand how you're doing in terms of cloud adoption. Where are we in the cloud? And are we in the cloud at the right pockets? And you do this by juxtaposing the business capabilities with the application portfolio. So you can easily identify who are the applications that are already cloud enabled, what is their end of life situation, and where are the pockets of applications that are not cloud enabled, and are we having any plans to moving these along. So when you come to now looking at the cloud migration topic from a portfolio perspective, you want to know how are we progressing, which has on the one hand the aspect how much of the portfolio have we even considered for the cloud migration topic. You can see 62% here, which means about 1/3 of the portfolio has not even been accounted for in the cloud migration conversation. You want to look at this from the cost lens to know, okay, are we hitting the levers which have the biggest impact capabilities? You're looking at this through the lens of vendors to see, okay, can we bring vendor cloud capabilities to the table to improve and speed up our journey to the cloud. So in summarizing, a portfolio-based approach to a cloud strategy management and cloud migration will give you the advantage of being faster and more reliable. You are able to base on detailed assessment and provide transparency from the technology level all the way to the business capabilities. You have the ability to make this an ongoing, continuous activity rather than an ad hoc campaign-driven one, because many times over you will have to make adjustments and changes to those plans. And it allows you to actually make this a topic that is shared between business and IT, because you are basing it on very simple assessments that can be brought together into these portfolio perspectives. And with this, you are assuring that you get the biggest business value and you are maximizing your technology resource use as well. So with this, I think we are through the material for today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.